In the hushed expanse of the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. The gallery, packed with an array of onlookers, from seasoned attorneys to curious bystanders, buzzed with muted whispers. At the front, standing with a poise that belied her years, was Maya Brooks. Her youth was stark against the backdrop of the heavy dark wood of the courtroom and the row of stern-faced judges seated before her. Clad in a simple yet sharp navy blazer, Maya's presence was an anomaly in this arena typically dominated by experienced legal minds. Each judge, with their furrowed brows and piercing gaze, seemed to embody the weight of the law itself, casting skeptical looks towards her. The gavel struck, a sharp sound that sliced through the murmurs, silencing the room instantly. As the chief judge leaned forward, peering over his glasses, the moment stretched, teetering on the brink of historic. Maya, undeterred by the sea of doubting eyes, stood ready. This was her battleground, and despite the odds stacked high against her, her resolve was unshakable. The stage was set for a confrontation that could change the course of her life forever.
Before we dive into today's story, we'd love your support. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your engagement helps us create more inspiring stories just for you. Now, without further ado, let's get started.
Maya Brooks was not your ordinary teenager. At just 17, she had already accomplished what many in the legal field could only aspire to achieve after decades. Maya's journey into the world of law began at the tender age of 7, not out of ambition, but necessity. Raised by her grandmother Clara in the quiet suburbs of Chicago, Maya found solace in the pages of law books that once belonged to her late father, a respected attorney himself. By 12, she was debating legal theories with college students, her keen intellect often leaving her older counterparts in awe and sometimes in defeat. Despite her brilliance, Maya shunned the spotlight. She preferred the comforting silence of her home library, surrounded by towering books, over the applause of debating clubs and academic accolades. Her grandmother always reminded her, "Use your gifts for good, Maya. There's more to knowledge than just holding it." Her life took a pivotal turn when a close family friend unjustly lost their home over a tangled legal misunderstanding. The incident lit a fire within Maya. She delved deeper into studying law, not just as a scholarly pursuit, but as a means to fight injustice. That resolve brought her to this moment in court, standing alone, yet unflinching, before a panel of judges who viewed her as little more than a child misplaced in the solemnity of a courtroom. The case was peculiar, involving a local business accused of fraudulent practices that had ensnared several of the town's residents, including some of Maya's own neighbors. When the public defender's office found itself overwhelmed, Maya, with her precocious legal mind and a personal connection to the victims, volunteered to represent the case pro bono. News of a teenager stepping into such a role had spread quickly, drawing mixed reactions from curiosity to outright skepticism. As the proceedings began, Judge Patterson, known for his acerbic wit and notoriety for being particularly harsh on inexperienced lawyers, eyed Maya with a disdainful smirk. "Miss Brooks, is it?" he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a court of law, not a high school mock trial. Do enlighten us. How does a teenager come to represent a case of this complexity?" Maya's response was calm, her voice steady despite the palpable tension in the room. "Your Honor, the law does not discriminate by age. I'm here because I believe in justice, and I am fully prepared to argue this case based on its merits." A murmur ran through the crowd as Judge Patterson chuckled, shaking his head dismissively. "Very well, let us proceed. But remember, this is not a classroom. The decisions here affect real lives." Unbeknownst to the judge and the onlookers, Maya's preparation for this moment was thorough. She had spent countless nights poring over legal documents, case files, and precedent, understanding that the challenge was not just the case itself, but also proving her right to be there. As she presented her opening remarks, outlining the abuses and the clear violations of law by the business in question, her initial nervousness was replaced by a growing confidence. The room gradually fell silent, captivated by her articulate presentation and the depth of her understanding. Maya wasn't just a teenager playing the role of an attorney. She was the embodiment of a burgeoning legal force poised to challenge not only the misconceptions about her age, but the very injustices she had vowed to fight. As the prosecution laid out their case, citing a web of financial transactions and contractual obligations purportedly breached by the accused, the courtroom felt an air of certainty about the proceedings. The prosecutor, a seasoned lawyer with decades of experience, presented evidence with a polished assurance, seemingly unthreatened by the young defense attorney across from him. Maya listened intently, her eyes scanning the documents projected for the court's view, her mind racing through statutes, cases, and legal doctrines she had studied. As the prosecutor concluded, confident of the strength of his case, a slight smirk betraying his assurance, Maya rose from her chair. The room fell into a quiet anticipation. "Your Honor," Maya began, her voice clear and resonant in the crowded room, "the prosecution has made a compelling presentation, but it is fundamentally flawed." She proceeded to dismantle the prosecution's arguments systematically. Pointing to the screen displaying transaction records, Maya highlighted inconsistencies and misinterpretations of contractual terms that the prosecution had overlooked or misrepresented. She cited precedents, her words flowing with the precision of a seasoned lawyer, each citation supporting her arguments that the accused's actions were in compliance with contractual obligations and misrepresented by selective presentation of evidence. According to the case of Henderson v. Crown Corporation, as stated in Section 14, paragraph B, Maya continued, her argument building in strength as she cited similar cases. The prosecutor, initially dismissive, began to show signs of irritation as Maya's counter-arguments picked apart his case, revealing oversights that drew murmurs from the audience. Judge Patterson, too, began to take notes, his expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. As Maya concluded her rebuttal, the courtroom was silent, the weight of her arguments settling over the room like a heavy cloak. Whispers broke out among the spectators, a mix of disbelief and admiration swirling in the air. Did she just make the prosecutor reconsider his own case? Someone muttered audibly. Judge Patterson called for a brief recess, a rare occurrence after an opening statement. The prosecutor huddled with his team, their voices low and urgent, re-evaluating their strategy in light of the unexpected challenge. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her seat, her poise unchanged, despite the eyes fixed on her, some still skeptical, but many reflecting a newfound respect. During the recess, several attorneys approached Maya, offering quick words of encouragement or asking pointed questions about her arguments. "Impressive citations, Miss Brooks. How did you prepare?" one older lawyer asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and professional respect. "I believe in thorough preparation and understanding both sides of the case, sir," Maya replied, her demeanor respectful yet confident. The buzz in the corridors spoke of a shift in perception. Maya was no longer just a novelty act in court, but a formidable opponent. As the court reconvened, the atmosphere had palpably shifted. The prosecutor, usually dominant and unchallenged, now appeared more measured, aware that any oversight would be expertly seized upon by the young attorney opposite him. Judge Patterson addressed the court, his voice reflecting a slight change in tone. "Let us proceed with the understanding that each point of law and fact will be thoroughly examined, regardless of who presents it." Maya's next few exchanges with the prosecution were sharp, her questions piercing through the facades of confidence that the witnesses for the prosecution tried to maintain. Each answer was carefully picked apart, analyzed for its merit, and often turned on its head to support her defense. The crowd, initially entertained by the novelty of a young girl in court, now leaned forward in their seats, engrossed by the legal acumen being displayed. Maya Brooks was no longer just a young girl out of her depth. She was a warrior in the courtroom, her weapon of choice being her intellect and her unwavering dedication to justice. As the day drew to a close, the tide was clearly turning, and it was apparent to all who witnessed the proceedings that this case was about more than just legal statutes and contractual disputes. It was a testament to the power of preparation, intellect, and the pursuit of justice. As the trial progressed, the skepticism that had initially clouded the courtroom began to dissipate, replaced by an atmosphere charged with anticipation. The moment of reckoning arrived when a crucial point of contention arose regarding the interpretation of a complex legal statute. The prosecution asserted a traditional interpretation, confident in the solidity of established precedents. Maya, standing poised before the court, requested permission to approach the bench. With a nod from Judge Patterson, whose demeanor had shifted from condescension to cautious respect, she walked towards the judge, her steps measured and confident. "Your Honor, members of the court," Maya began, her voice resonant and clear, "I wish to present not only a counter-argument, but evidence of my qualifications to argue this point, which may be in question due to my age." From her briefcase, she extracted a slim folder, the contents of which caught the light of the courtroom lamps as she handed them to the bailiff. As the documents made their way to Judge Patterson, the courtroom fell into a hushed silence. The papers fluttered slightly in his hands as he examined them. A copy of Maya's early graduation diploma from high school, her accelerated college degree certifications, and most strikingly, her bar exam results, passed with distinction at an unprecedented age. The judge's eyes widened perceptibly, and the courtroom erupted into a low murmur. Judge Patterson, clearing his throat, addressed the court. "It appears," he said, with a newfound tone of respect, "that Miss Brooks is more than qualified to make her case." Turning to Maya, he nodded slightly. "Please proceed, Counselor." Empowered by the judge's acknowledgement, Maya returned to her podium with a renewed vigor. The courtroom's energy had shifted palpably. The audience, the jury, and even the opposition now hung on her every word. "Thank you, Your Honor," Maya said, turning her attention back to the matter at hand. "The statute in question," she continued, expertly citing specific subsections and related case law, has been misinterpreted in the past due to a common oversight in its language. Allow me to clarify the legislative intent and how it applies to our case. With precision and clarity, Maya laid out her interpretation of the statute, supporting her points with historical contexts, previous court decisions, and her own razor-sharp analysis. Her argument was not only a display of legal acumen, but an educational discourse that captivated everyone present. As she spoke, Maya used a digital projector to display excerpts of legal texts, her annotations appearing on the screen, highlighting and connecting key points. The prosecutor, initially poised to object, found himself listening intently, occasionally nodding in reluctant agreement. The turning point came when Maya addressed a landmark case that had previously set a precedent contrary to her argument. With meticulous care, she demonstrated how the facts of that case were fundamentally different from the present case, thereby challenging the applicability of the precedent. Therefore, Maya concluded, the precedent that the prosecution relies upon does not in fact support their case, but rather illuminates the misapplication of the statute in our current context. The courtroom was silent for a moment after Maya finished her exposition. Then, slowly, a soft applause started among the spectators, an unusual occurrence in such a setting, quickly silenced by the gavel of Judge Patterson. However, the small act reflected the monumental shift in the room. Maya had not only defended her client effectively, but had educated the court, shifting the narrative firmly in her favor. Judge Patterson, typically stern and unyielding, gave Maya a nod of acknowledgement. "Very well argued, Miss Brooks. The court will take a recess to consider these points more thoroughly," he announced. As the court adjourned, the prosecutor approached Maya, his expression one of mixed admiration and chagrin. "Miss Brooks, That was an impressive piece of legal scholarship. I must admit, you've given us much to think about, he said, extending his hand. Maya accepted the handshake, her expression composed, but her eyes alight with the fire of victory. Thank you, sir. I believe every case is an opportunity to seek the truth, not just to win. The scene closed with Maya gathering her papers, her confidence and command of the law undeniable. The young prodigy had not only silenced her critics, but had taken control of the narrative, steering it towards an undeniable exposition of justice and legal mastery. The courtroom recess was filled with an electric buzz, a stark contrast to the skepticism that had permeated the atmosphere earlier that morning. Lawyers, journalists, and spectators discussed in hushed tones the remarkable turn of events they had just witnessed. Judge Patterson, known for his stringent adherence to protocol, seemed deep in thought, his previous doubts about Maya now replaced by a consideration of her compelling arguments. As the court reconvened, the dynamics had unmistakably shifted. The prosecution, once assertive and dominant, now appeared more cautious, carefully considering each statement before speaking. Maya's presentation had not only showcased her legal expertise, but had fundamentally altered the tone of the proceedings. The jury, previously indifferent, now watched Maya with keen interest, clearly influenced by her commanding delivery and the judge's respectful acknowledgement of her credentials. Judge Patterson resumed the session with a nod to Maya. "Counselor Brooks, please continue your defense." His use of counselor was a formal recognition, an endorsement of her status that was not lost on anyone in the room. As the trial moved forward, Maya's confidence seemed to buoy her even further. During a break, several attorneys approached her, their earlier skepticism replaced by curiosity and respect. "That was an outstanding analysis, Miss Brooks," one seasoned lawyer commented, shaking her hand. "You've given us all a masterclass today." Maya, gracious yet modest, thanked them and expressed her hope that her efforts would contribute positively to the outcome for her client. Her interaction with her peers not only reflected her growing stature within the legal community, but also her ability to bridge the gap between her youth and her exceptional capabilities. Meanwhile, the plaintiff, a middle-aged man who had risked losing his small business due to the alleged contractual breaches, approached Maya with tears in his eyes. "I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When you took on my case, I didn't know what to expect, but now I've never been more confident in our chance for justice." Maya listened intently, her expression empathetic. "We're in this together," she assured him. "Your story and the injustice you faced are what brought me here today. I'm committed to seeing this through, not just as your lawyer, but as someone who believes in what's right." This interaction highlighted Maya's deep commitment to justice, not merely as a legal pursuit, but as a personal crusade against injustice. Her relationship with her client underscored her role as much more than a legal representative. She was a champion for those wronged by more than just legal oversights, but by systemic failures. As the trial neared its conclusion, the impact of Maya's earlier revelations continued to resonate. The prosecution struggled to regain their earlier momentum, their arguments now seeming to lack the conviction they had before. Maya, on the other hand, continued to press her advantage, her every statement and question sharpening the focus on her client's righteousness and the prosecution's lack of substantive evidence. The session ended with the judge commending both sides for their vigor, but noting the particularly impressive performance by the defense. "Miss Brooks has reminded us all," Judge Patterson remarked, "that the law, above all, is about justice and the courage to uphold it, irrespective of the odds." As people began to leave the courtroom, the murmurs were not about the novelty of a teenage lawyer, but about the emergence of a new legal force. Maya had not only defended her client, but had shifted the narrative, turning what many expected to be a swift prosecution into a showcase of defense acumen that challenged not just the case at hand, but the very perceptions of justice and legal advocacy. As the final day of the trial dawned, the courtroom was filled to capacity, a testament to the compelling nature of the case and the profound interest Maya Brooks had ignited. With the audience and jury's full attention, Maya approached the podium to deliver her closing arguments, the culmination of her transformative journey within these courtroom walls. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Maya began, her voice steady and imbued with the gravity of the moment. "This case is not only about contractual disputes or the complexities of legal statutes. At its core, this trial is about justice, about ensuring that the law protects those who are unable to protect themselves from larger, more powerful forces." With eloquence and precision, Maya recapped the evidence presented, emphasizing the flaws in the prosecution's case and the strength of her legal arguments. She wove through the narrative of the trial, the doubts cast on her capabilities, the turning points where she had demonstrated not only her skill, but also her deep understanding and respect for the law. "This courtroom," Maya continued, "has witnessed not just a battle of legal wits, but a reaffirmation of what justice truly entails. It has seen a young lawyer, admittedly inexperienced yet undeterred, strive to ensure that fairness prevails over prejudice and truth triumphs over convenience." As she concluded, Maya's closing not only summarized the case, but also highlighted her own growth, from a doubted newcomer to a respected advocate whose voice had become indispensable in the quest for justice. The courtroom, so often a place of contention and conflict, was unified for a moment in recognition of the ideals she espoused. After a brief recess to deliberate, Judge Patterson returned with a demeanor that reflected the weight of his responsibility. The courtroom hushed as he prepared to deliver his verdict. "The arguments presented in this case have been robust and thought-provoking," the judge began, his eyes occasionally flicking to Maya, acknowledging her significant role. "It is not often that we see such a powerful reminder of the fundamental principles of justice. The defense, led by Miss Maya Brooks, has provided not only a competent challenge to the prosecution, but has also elevated the discourse in this courtroom." Turning his gaze to the jury and then the wider courtroom, Judge Patterson announced his decision. "After careful consideration, I find in favor of the defendant. The evidence against him does not meet the requisite standard of proof required for conviction." The courtroom erupted into applause, a rare occurrence, but indicative of the emotional investment of those present. Maya's client was overcome with relief, his gratitude towards Maya evident as he classively held her hands, thanking her again. As the crowd dispersed, Maya stood quietly, absorbing the moment of victory not only for her client, but for her personal and professional journey. Reflecting on the outcome, Maya felt a profound sense of accomplishment and a reaffirmation of her chosen path. This trial, Maya reflected to a group of young interns who had followed the case closely, was about more than winning or losing. It was about asserting the importance of justice and the role we, as legal practitioners, play in upholding these tenets. Always remember, our commitment should be to the truth and to the people we serve. Her words resonated with the interns, but more importantly, they marked Maya's evolution from a prodigious student of law to a formidable and principled defender of justice. She had not only secured a victory in court, but had also gained the respect and acknowledgement of her peers, her community, and the legal establishment. As Maya left the courthouse, her thoughts were on the future. She knew this was just the beginning of her journey in law and advocacy. With each step, she was determined to challenge injustices and inspire others, just as she had been inspired. The legacy of this case would not just be the verdict, but the impact it had on everyone who witnessed a young lawyer stand unyielded, guided by her conviction and her unwavering pursuit of justice. As the courtroom doors closed behind her, Maya Brooks found a quiet bench under the old oaks that lined the courthouse square. It was here, away from the echoing gavels and whispered legal debates, that she allowed herself a moment of reflection on the intense journey that had just concluded. The gentle rustling of the leaves provided a soothing backdrop to her contemplative state. Maya thought back to her initial steps into the courtroom, carrying not only her legal briefs, but also a heavy burden of doubt from others about her capabilities. The victory was not just a legal triumph, but a personal one that shattered the ceilings of age and experience expected in her field. This case, Maya mused aloud, wasn't just about proving my client innocent. It was about proving to every young person who has been told they are too young, too inexperienced, or too naive that perseverance, rooted in justice, can prevail. Maya's reflections were interrupted by a gentle approach. It was her grandmother, Clara, who had been her steadfast supporter from the beginning. Clara's eyes twinkled with pride as she sat beside Maya, taking her hand. "You've done something remarkable, Maya," Clara said. "Not just in winning, but in inspiring. What's next for you?" Maya smiled, squeezing her grandmother's hand. "I've been thinking about that a lot. This case has taught me the power of advocacy, not just within the walls of a courtroom, but beyond. I want to start a program for young legal minds, to mentor and guide them. Many don't get the opportunities I had. I want to change that." Clara nodded approvingly. "And you will," she affirmed. "You have the determination and now the platform. Use it wisely." Maya's thoughts turned to the broader implications of her victory. She had challenged not only the specifics of a legal case, but the underlying biases that often pervaded the justice system. "This victory is a testament," Maya continued, "that the law is a living, breathing entity that must evolve with society. We must be vigilant, persistent, and always guided by what is just and fair." The lessons of the trial were many, but for Maya, the most enduring was the importance of resilience. "I faced skepticism and ridicule, but I stayed true to my course," Maya reflected. "Every young person should know that it's not the criticism of the crowd, but the courage of one's convictions that defines us." As Maya discussed her plans, she spoke of expanding her reach, writing about her experiences, and engaging in public speaking to advocate for legal education reforms. "Justice isn't confined to the courtroom," she asserted. "It's in schools, it's in our communities, and it starts with how we educate and empower our youth." Clara listened, her heart swelling with pride at her granddaughter's ambitions. "You're going to change the world, Maya," she said softly. Maya looked around the peaceful park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the path ahead. "Maybe, Grandma," she replied thoughtfully. "But even if I just change one person's world, like we did in this case, that will be enough. Each small victory is a step towards greater justice." As they stood to leave, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her journey through the trial was arduous and fraught with challenges, but it had clarified her vision for her future. She was more determined than ever to be a voice for those who felt voiceless and to champion the cause of justice wherever it was needed. Reflecting on her own path, Maya realized that her story was one of many in the vast tapestry of the legal profession. Each lawyer, each case, each verdict contributed to the ever-evolving narrative of law and justice. For Maya, her victory was a single, bright thread woven into that larger story, vibrant and resilient, inspiring others to weave their own threads of change and justice into the fabric of society.